Hello, hello, good morning. Doing things a little different today. I'm going to read out of our book today first and do the chakra work a little bit later. I have a little change in schedule this week, so we're mixing it up, which is okay because that's part of the chakra work, right? The second chakra helps us ebb and flow. Ebb and flow. Okay, let's see, like the waves in the ocean, ebb and flow. Sounds like a Beastie Boys song. I'm sure there is one actually similar to that. I can't remember what it is right now off the top of my head. Okay, let's see here. What chapter are we on? What chapter are we on? What chapter of life are we on? Moving forward. Ooh, I know we are. Chapter 18. Remember, they had just had that big city council meeting. All the tribes and different parts of the city and the tree people and the ore people and everybody met up to talk about what are we going to do when the Southlands come invading. They decided they're going to blow up the bridges. One of the things, right? To isolate. Like you do with the disease, you isolate the disease. So anyway, and that they're going to fight a war differently using consciousness. Okay, chapter 18. I am changed, Madrone thought. The bees have marked me as surely as their scar sits on my forehead. She moved through a world that came to her now as much through instinct, as smell, as through sight. Even when she stayed out of the bee mind, she knew it was blossoming, and who was about to become ill. She walked through zones of smells, pungent sage, new-leafed oak or sycamore, human sweat. She knew where the birds nested and where scurrying mice piled their droppings. People had their own unique fragrances. Her nose told her more than her hands or eyes about the energies moving in their bodies, about their needs and lacks and imbalances, about states of arousal, anger, or fear. She often felt mildly nauseated, without appetite, in spite of the meager diet. The honey that infused all they ate nourished her more fully than she would have believed possible. The sun was hotter in spring, and no one moved much by day. Even the able-bodied spent much of their time sleeping in the shade. The flu had abated, but Baptist had woken one night crying out in agony. Madrone had gone to him to try to soothe the pain. The ammonia tinge of the air around him told her he had a blocked kidney. Her hands did the rest, shifting his energies, feeling out the obstruction, easing and stretching the tubes of the ureter so the stone could pass. Ouch. By morning he was sleeping peacefully. She was exhausted. How's Baptist? Highjohn asked her, coming over to squat companionably beside her as she perched on a log to drink her morning's ration of water. I'm getting to be like a dog, Madrone thought, smelling her own adrenaline rush of irritation. Don't interrupt me when I'm eating or drinking. But she answered him courteously. He's better. I was able to strengthen his kidney chi, and he passed the stone. But it could happen to him again, or to any of us. We all need more water. We need a lot of things. Highjohn was about some sort of rotation between the camps with more water and this one. Like 3 months on and off, even just to get everyone good and hydrated periodically. Otherwise, over the years, you're going to get out and out renal failure. What's that? The shutdown of the kidneys. Is that so? It's so. The good camps are too far away. Far away from what? High John looked up at her and smiled, his lips stretching into a challenging line. Maybe it's time we sent you on a raid? He smelled a lot like the trees, like acorns and honey, but she had a sudden urge to reach out and touch his wizened cheeks. Diosa, Madrone thought, I do find him attractive. She'd been too long without a lover, except for the bee women, and what they had done had only amplified her need for touch, skin on skin. What kind of raid? Pharmacy. The boys down in Hollywood thought if you went with them, you could help them identify some of the drugs. Is it dangerous? Madrone couldn't help but ask. Everything's dangerous, but they'll take good care of you, Little John, and be good. They'll be your guides. They hiked along the ridge, the mountains folding away below them in the darkness, stars glittering overhead. A belt of lights gleamed below them, jewels studding the night on the sloping edges of the hills. Beyond, in the flat basin, factories glowed eerily. Here and there a steady flame from a chimney pot illuminated a cloud of smoke. They crouched in the shadow of a clump of bushes and looked down on the freeway, which stretched like a concrete river cleaving the hills below them. You've got a good head for heights, I hope, Little John said. Good enough, Madrone said, swallowing nervously. The motion only irritated her already dry thought. Actually, she hated heights. The summer they had done their rock climbing course when she was 14, she had been one of the near torture for her. But she reflected it had taught her what it was intended to teach, and that she could face a fear and move on through. Below them on the roadbed, lights raced back and forth. Cars, supply trucks, troops moving to and from the military camps that filled with Be Good called St. Ferd's Valley. Madrone stared at the lights, almost hypnotized. She hadn't seen so many motor vehicles. Bye, Veronica. Have a good day. Love you. The motion. Oh, okay, hold on. Below them, on the roadbed, lights raced back and forth. Cars, supply trucks, troops moving to and from military camps that filled with Be Good called St. Fred's Valley. Madrone stared at the lights, almost hypnotized. She hadn't seen so many motor vehicles moving at once since her early childhood. It was a strange sight, like a time warp. Gas-powered cars, the smell of the chemicals that the cars released in their passing burned the inside of her nose. They moved so smoothly and confidently as if nothing were wrong, as if tankers still plied the oceans filled with oil from faraway lands, and plains still spanned the continents, and the Central Valley were still rich, populated farmland, not uninhabitable desert. Where do they get the gas and metal and rubber for those tires? She asked. They still drill a bit offshore down by Long Beach. They brew some gasohol, and they cannibalize. There's huge factories down there in the flats where they take apart old cars and make new ones for the military and the rich. You gotta be rich to afford the driving permit. Don't you use cars in the north? Very little. We have very few electric vehicles, mostly for emergencies, fire pumps and ambulances. We can't support a private motor vehicle for every person. We can't spare the land to drive and park on, let alone resources to build and maintain them. What do you do then? We use bicycles and horses. Some, and trains to move heavy goods, a few electro trucks that go where there aren't any rail lines. And we have good public transport networks all around the bay. She could have happily gone on for hours describing the transport collective and the gondolas in intricate detail, but she could not avoid the ascent ahead forever. Is that what we have to cross? To the right, a concrete overpass spanned the road. It was partially supported by a skeleton of steel. protection against earthquakes that provided a crisscrossing ridge of interlocking beams. That's it, Little John said. It's the jungle gym from hell, Madrone said brightly. The beams are the best way to go, Be Good said. If you can do it, otherwise we have to shoot the guard. The guard paced back and forth on the roadway above them. Yes, it would be unfortunate to shoot him just to save herself the trip across the beams, but it was tempting. The lower support beam's your best bet, Little John said. It's broad enough, about a foot wide. The other problem's getting on and off of it, or if you freeze up in the middle. If you think you might panic in the middle, Be Good said, it'd be better just to shoot the guard and get it over with, than to have to peel you off and end up shooting all sorts of guards later, not to mention risking getting our asses fried. Remember the time old John froze up midway? Shit, we practically had to carry him out to the middle supports, and then he couldn't get back on the beam, and dawn was coming. We ended up stuck there all day, hiding out behind the overhang until it got dark again. High John had to hike back. Steal some rope, shoot the guard after all, and then we had to haul old John up the side in broad daylight. There we were, out in the middle of the bridge with no cover and a whole platoon of stewardship's troops bearing down on us. I can do it, Madrone said, if we just go ahead and don't think about it. Can we go now? Quietly, they crept down the side of the hill to the base of the overpass. Little John climbed the struts that led to the main beam, pulling himself gracefully up from one to the next. Madrone followed. Wishing her arms were stronger, Be Good came behind, occasionally giving her a welcome push. The concrete surface of the overpass stretched above them, curving in two gentle arches supported in the center by thick piers anchored in the middle divider of the freeway. A scaffolding of steel framing followed the contours. Little John swung himself into the central support beam and stood up. Confidently he walked out, balanced 100 feet above the roadway. Just one thing, Be Good said cheerfully. If you fall, try not to scream. Sure, Madrone said, taking a deep breath that choked her with the fumes from below. Don't think about it. Just do it, she told herself, and stepped out. If she thought of the beam as a line on the road, she could walk it easily, fearlessly. If there were nowhere to fall, she couldn't fear falling and wouldn't fall. And if her heart would just stop that silly pounding and her stomach stop that twisting sensation. Every 20 feet or so, a steel pier stretched vertically up from the beam to connect with the support struts that ran beneath the concrete. Little John grabbed them with both hands and swung his body around them. When she reached the first one, she did the same. Not bad, she thought, although her hands were sweaty and slippery, and the moment when she had to release her weight from one foot before she could solidly place the other was terrible. She remembered suddenly one of those afternoons on the rocks. She was halfway up a cliff and stuck fast, couldn't move up or down. Nita had been her partner, and she was getting excited, yelling down instructions and exhortations. Then Bird came by and had suggested very calmly that she open her eyes and look at where she wanted to go and think how to get there. She did. Remembering that, she was around the second pier. She thought of Bird sitting down at a piano, his hands so clumsy at the keys, and the song he had made for her came back to her as she wiggled onto the concrete supports of the central piers. Halfway, Little John said. You want to rest? No, let's get it over with, Madrone said. The second half, with Bird's song ringing inside her, was a little easier. But by the time they reached the opposite side, her shirt was soaked through with sweat, and as they touched the ground, she noticed her knees were trembling. Be Good landed beside her. Good girl, Little John said. Let's go, Madrone said. The hills on the east side of the freeway were far more populated than those on the west. They made their way along the roadway lined by enormous estates. From time to time cars approached, and the three flung themselves into bushes or hid behind trees until the headlights swept past them. All Madrone's senses were alert. She could smell unseen roses that clambered up walls. She could scent dogs far away to skirt the edges of the territory and prevent them from barking. They walked for what seemed like hours. Madrone was thirsty, but she popped a raw acorn into her mouth and let its astringent bite distract her. The moon sailed over them, a thin, waning crescent. She was tired. So tired she felt she was walking in her sleep. No more cars passed. It was almost dawn. They were still high on the ridge as the light from the soon-to-rise sun made a pink smear on the basin's eastern rim. High bushes of feathery chamise gave them some cover, and Madrone could look through their concealing spires and see the panorama spread out below. The vast, flat plain of the basin was dust dry. A haze hovered over the jumbled forms of cracked buildings and crumbling structures. No discernible lines of road or streets and no spots of green relieved the patchwork of gray and brown. Only here and there, towering back stumps of dead palm trees marched in uneven lines, the ragged sentinels of ancient avenues. A narrow band of green hugged the base of the hills and sent tendrils up into some of the eastern canyons. Compared to the drab of the plain, the green looked almost obscene, too bright somehow, almost artificial. She could see on the nearer slopes rich houses surrounded by terraced and landscaped gardens. Far to the east, the towers of downtown rose in vertical spires of metal and glass. "Hurry," Little John said, motioning them down a side road that soon dead-ended at a wire fence. Beyond, a dirt road led into a canyon. They climbed the fence and scrambled down the road, reaching cover of brush around the dry steam bed, just as the sun rose full in the sky. The word camp, Madrone thought, was a gross exaggeration for what they found, which consisted of 2 men and 1 woman huddled in a hollow under a bush. "Drink deep," they murmured, a greeting which more and more sounded to Madrone like pure sarcasm. Little John uncorked a water bottle and passed it around for a carefully measured swallow. "Go easy," he warned Madrone. "You guys have any water?" "A cup or two's all we got left," said the man closer to Madrone. He was short and slight, hardly more than a boy, but his brown, leathery skin made him look ancient. "They call me Big John," he said, winking. "This here, Joan Dark, and Johnny come lately." Lately was dry and dark as a bean that lain too long in the sun, but he had a wide friendly grin and green eyes that looked speculatively into Madrone's. Joan Dark was silent, and Madrone smelled sickness on her, and pain. "You the healer?" Lately asked. "Yes, I'm Madrone." "Can you look at Joan? She took a bullet graze a couple of nights ago, and now it's infected." Joan was thin to the point of emaciation, and her half-moon eyes were shrouded, wary. Madrone unwrapped the bandage of rough, dirty cloth from the woman's stringy thigh. The stench assaulted her. The wound was shallow, but the flesh around it was inflamed. An ominous red streak went up her thigh into her groin. "Can we spare any water for washing?" The others exchanged glances. "We don't have much," Little John said. "She can have mine," Lately said. "We all share a bit," Little John said, "but go easy on it." Madrone nodded, pulled out one of the clean rags she had stashed in her pack, and wet it gingerly. Carefully she swabbed out what she could of the dirt that clogged the wound. What did they want from her? Wave a magic wand and make everything better, when there was nothing to work with, not even the most basic necessities. Oh, she was angry, but not at these men. not even at the lawn-enveloped mansions that clung to the hill above them, but at the sheer greed and waste of it all. I'll be all right. I'll be all right by tonight, Joan murmured. No, you won't, Madrone said. You have a very serious infection, and you need to lie still and quiet and rest. Can't you heal it? Madrone sighed. I can give you energy and relieve some pain, but without being able to wash it properly, even if I could magically kill off this batch of microbes, the dirt in the wound would reinfect it. What can we do? Lately whispered. Look for anti-infections when we raid the pharmacy. Isn't there anywhere we can take her where she could be cared for? There's Katie's place down in the city, Little John said. How far is that? 10, 15 miles? That's too far. Little John shrugged. Madrone bit her lips again. It wasn't their fault that all these warm and comfortable houses perched so blithely on the ridge were closed to them. She frets, Be Good explained to Big John. Where she comes from, this doesn't happen. No? Wounds don't get infected? People are cared for, Madrone said. Whatever happens, and nobody lacks water for something as basic as washing. And then she had to tell them again about the running streams and the streets planted with fruit trees and the gardens. My fairy tale, she thought. The sun rose higher, and she was overwhelmed by exhaustion after doing what she could for Joan. They curled into the shadows of the brush and slept. They woke at sunset, ate some acorns dipped in honey, drank. When darkness fell, Madrone washed Joan's wound again. She was weak and feverish and didn't even argue when they left her alone, wrapped in a blanket and provided with all the food and water they could spare. They headed up the path, stopping at Big John and lately removed a pair of shotguns from a sachet in the side of the canyon. Little John and Be Good were carrying their laser rifles. Lately handed Madrone a pistol, but she stood looking at it, feeling its cold weight in her hand. I can't take it, she said. I'll show you how to fire it, Little John said. It's the simplest thing. It's the simplest thing we've got. She shook her head. I know how to shoot a pistol. We learned in school. Our teacher said we had to be familiar with guns to understand history. I just don't want to kill anyone. Nobody wants to kill anyone, Little John said patiently. If it all goes well, we won't. This is just a precaution. She remembered the feel of the guns they practiced with, the recoil as the bullets exploded out, the challenge of hitting a target, and the horror at the thought of what that force could do to living flesh. Could she pull the trigger in some unknown person's life? If it were a choice between that and the pens, or losing her own life. Her hand was shaking. I can't take it. Then you're an added danger to all of us, Big John said. If you won't defend yourself, and you won't defend us, I just don't think I could do it. You know, you won't. You don't know until you try, Be Good said. I can't. Don't push her, Little John said. She'll be a worse danger to us all if she gets jumpy with a gun in her hand. Leave her be. This is going to be cake, right? Nobody's going to shoot nobody tonight. She was grateful to Little John, but she still felt shaken, oddly ashamed. Because this is not so much a stand I take from conviction, she admitted, but from some instinctive revulsion. If I'm really such a pacifist, I should be here. I shouldn't be working with them and supporting their fight, but I don't know that I am, that I would go to the pens rather than let these men kill another man to protect me. And if I feel that way, I should defend myself. But I can't. Come on then, Big John said. The pharmacy was on the edge of the valley on the north side of the mountains. 2 hours of fast hiking brought them to a sheltered hollow on the lower slopes of the last hill, where they could look down on a huge metal warehouse surrounded by chain-link fence and barbed wire strung on top. Armed guards patrolled the gate. Madrone and her companions sat in the dark, reeking of weariness and excitement. What are we waiting for? Madrone whispered. Guard change, Little John said. Ah, there it comes. Below them, 2 new men approached the gate guards, talked for a moment, and then took their places. Who's our friend? Little John whispered. The tall one, Lately said. The taller of the two guards left his post and began making the rounds of the perimeter inside the chain-link fence. "What's happening?" Madrone asked. "He's supposed to unlock the back gate for us and deactivate the alarm," Big John said. "He's part of the web." They waited. Madrone tried to calm herself. She suspected the others were enjoying themselves. "But I'm not made for this sort of thing," she thought. "I'm not like Clyce, who craved danger and died for it. I don't want to die or kill." After a wait that seemed endless, the tall guards returned to the front gate. "Okay," Lately whispered. "Little John, you stay here. Cover the front entrance. Don't shoot anyone unless you have to. And don't shoot our friend, whatever you do. If there's trouble, give the call. Be good. You come down with us. Cover the side gate. Any trouble coming, try to get in. Give us a warning, okay? Let's go." They ran silently, crouching in the shadows, around the line of the fence to the southeast corner, out of sight of the gate on the west side. A small door opened into a chain-link fence, and cautiously, Lately pushed on it. It opened. "Come on." Madrone followed Lately and Big John, running quickly across the 20 feet of open space that separated the gate from a small side entrance into the warehouse. "Pray that our friend really turned off the alarm," Lately said, flashing a grin at Madrone as he pressed against the blank metal door. It opened inward. "Home free," he said. Inside, the smells of 1,000 chemicals assaulted her. She felt dizzy, almost numb with overload. Forests of high metal racks surrounded them, stacked high with boxes and bottles and containers. "Where do they get all this? Where does it all come from?" she whispered, astounded at the sheer abundance. There were more pills here in this one warehouse than all the storehouses in the Bay Area combined. "They have factories all over the valley, strictly under military control," Lately told her, "and farms up and down the coast where they grow some of the materials. A few of them are free farms, but a lot of them are labor camps. You can sign on if you're unemployed, work 7 days a week in the hot sun for 3 years and live like a dog, but you get all the highs and lows you can swallow. Those houses with their green lawns that you passed up the hills, this is where a lot of them get their money. And the black market in highs and lows is especially profitable." "Nothing is labeled," Madrone said. "How do we know what anything is?" "Big John's gone to get the scanner," Lately said. "You just sit tight here. Let us bring you things. We're looking for boosters, for highs and lows, and you tell us what else." "What's highs and lows?" "To sell and give to our friends. Keep 'em happy. We've got to finance this somehow." She wasn't at all happy with that answer, but there was nothing she could do about it. Big John returned with the scanner, which looked like square magnifying glasses on a stick. "Here's how it works," Lately said, taking down a box of pills from a shelf. "The labels are all in dot code on the front. See?" He pointed out a pattern of black dots, and she nodded. "Hold the scanner up and look through." When she looked into the lens, a name and a price appeared. "Well, that would be very helpful if I knew what these things were," Madrone said. "Don't you? I thought you knew about medications." "Some. We use drugs back home that we can culture or distill from what we've grown. Antibiotics and antivirals and anti-infections. They're more effective for some conditions than herbs or acupuncture or our other methods. But the stewards have things I only know about in theory. And then, by their Latin names and their chemical structure, not their brand names. Maybe I can make some guesses." "A lot of stuff we can reorganize," Lately said. "Can you find some boosters? I'd like to examine them." "Sure, but if you want something for Joan, you'll have to tell us what to look for." "I have no idea what it would look like," Madrone said, dismayed. "Capsules, probably, not tablets, if that's any help." Her head was beginning to ache with the smells around her. If she could focus her bee sense, put it to use somehow. "Wait a minute. I've thought of something I could try. Bring me some things, and I'll see if I can find out what they are." She sat down in a corner with a pen Big John found for her, touching her bee spot. She let herself go into trance, but not all the way. I need to keep my human mind intact, to think and name and write, while I open the other senses. Melissa, can I do this? Here's some capsules, Lately said, placing a box on her knees. She broke one open, sniffed a few grains of powder, touched her tongue to them delicately. Taste and smell exploded in her brain. She was flying through orange groves, lemon blossomed, sweated through their pungent skin. She touched her B-spot again, wrote vitamin C on a box of capsules, and held out her hand for Lately's next offering. By the time she had sorted through 15 or 20 different drugs, her head was throbbing, and the gray metal shelves and boxes swam in a kaleidoscope patterns in front of her eyes. There was so much here she found herself infected with a kind of greed. Drugs to ease pain, and drugs to stimulate tissue growth, and drugs to reduce tumors, drugs to undo the effect of other drugs. If she could only study them, analyze them, know exactly how they worked. Her B sense could help her recognize drugs that she knew, but there were tantalizing hints of other things here, antidotes to the epidemics, maybe, advances as yet unfamiliar in the North. But without more time, more equipment, more backup, she couldn't know. Diosa! I don't know if I can handle any more, she said as Big John brought another box to her. We've got a full load of pleasure drugs, he said. Do you have what you want? I found some antibacterials and antivirals, Madrone said. These and these, and here are some painkillers. They're always useful. You can take the scanner, load up more of these. They brought her boxes and bottles, and she sorted frantically. What to take, what to leave. Hurry, Lately said. We've got to be out of here before 4 o'clock check. That's 10 minutes from now, and we've got to clean up first. Put these boxes back, Madrone said, indicating a pile of her rejects. If I can just find a good general anti-infection. Big John returned boxes to shelves. Lately packed up backpacks with Madrone's selections. She felt her own fear growing, but it was hard to tear herself away not to try tasting just one more and one more. Here, she said, take this and... That's all, Lately said. We don't have room or time for more. Big John, run the scanner back. Take your pack, Madrone. Don't forget to wipe your fingerprints. Her hands were shaking, and she picked up the pack. The ground seemed to be moving under her feet, and her head weighed enough to drag her down. Big John grabbed the scanner, ran swiftly through the corridors, returning quickly. Out! Lately hissed, and now she could smell the real fear in him. Cautiously, he pushed the door open a crack, scanned the pavement outside, and motioned them to come on. Fast, he said. They ran out, Madrone's heart pounding. The pavement seemed elastic under her feet, and she could hardly tell which way was up or down. Big John grabbed her hand and pulled her along, but the 20 feet between the door and the gate seemed to stretch for miles. They heard a long whistle, like a mournful bird, and Be Good waved them through, shutting the gate behind them and clicking the lock shut. Down, he whispered, and they threw themselves flat into the shadows outside the fence and lay there scarcely breathing as footsteps passed behind them, just on the other side of the fence. He'll smell us, Madrone thought. Her own fear was so strong she was sure it tainted the air for miles. But the footsteps passed by, and when they turned the corner, Lately motioned on them again. They climbed silently up the dry hillside to the sheltered hollow where Little John waited. Madrone's legs felt weak. She was surprised they could bear her weight, but they did. No trouble? Lately whispered to Little John. All okay? You? Close, but not too close, Lately whispered. If our friend gets that door locked again and the alarm on, they'll never know they were raided until they take inventory. And now they were enjoying themselves, Madrone thought, like boys playing an exciting game. Would I? If I do this regularly, will I get to like it, the adrenaline rush and fear and relief? How do you like your first raid? Lately asked, grinning at her. I like it now, she said, now that it's over. It's not over yet, Little John said. Let's get out of here. That was it.